the science of quantum physics actually explains a lot that goes on in the woo. Yeah, we deal in classical science because it's in a third density environment. Everything is energy, frequency, and vibration. They need energy because they've been crossbred a lot with indigenous people over the eons of time. These things have been here a long time.
Okay, people, I'm absolutely honoured today to be speaking with Ron Morehead, the man who brought us the Sierra Sounds, the man who brought some kind of sense and semblance to the subject of Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever you want to call it, and probably spent a lifetime within the subject now, the author of 3 books, Voices in the Wilderness, Bigfoot Unveiled, and The Quantum Bigfoot, 4 books, volumes 1 and 2. Ron, welcome.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It really is. And when I said I'm honoured, I didn't say that lightly. I really am, because your voice, you're the man that people come to. You kind of set a benchmark when it comes to studying and looking deeper into what these strange creatures are all about. And, you know, I know you probably... Everybody wants to take you back to, is it 1971 when you recorded the sounds? I'm not certain. Was it?
71 through 76, yeah.
But prior to 71, had you got more experience or any experience of these creatures?
None at all, no. They weren't on my radar. They weren't on anybody's radar. The hunting camp that I went to, they were all not even thinking about Bigfoot. It's a hunting camp, had been since 1958.
So if someone had come to you prior to that and said, I've seen this, in some people's eyes, it could be described as a monster. It would be an absolutely terrifying thing to look at. What would you think back then your opinion would have been?
Well, I asked them what they've been smoking or what. No, I didn't have anything against somebody like that. I just, I'm open-minded, and, I said, okay, that's what they thought they saw. Maybe they did see it. I don't know, because I didn't at the time when they were telling me that. So I wouldn't have, I would have to judge, and you're not supposed to judge, but you do.
You assess people at face value as they approach you, don't you? So there were no subtle hints then, no sounds, no tree knocks. There was nothing that you thought back now, oh, blooming heck, I heard that. No, nothing.
No, nothing. I had read about the Patterson film in 1967. I'd read about that or heard about that from when I was a young man, and that's all I knew. And I didn't know that. I just knew that they said it was some big Indian lost in the woods or something like that. That's what the paper said at the time.
So to pull it fully forward and then sort of go back a little bit, where has the research taken you from 1971 to now? So in the early days, what did you think we were dealing with, and what do you think today?
Well, in the early days, I thought we were dealing with some kind of an ape out there in the woods, and that just hadn't been identified yet. We just didn't know, because we just knew they were big. They had some really powerful sounds, and we couldn't trick them. We was trying to trick them all the time to get a picture or something. And it's taken me from that. I was raised religiously, so I studied the biblical texts, and I studied the ancient Greek. I started looking back in the history of giants, where they came from, and why would they be around today? How could they be around today? And what are they for? What's it's all about? So it took me from that all the way through to, Al Berry, the guy we took in 1972, who actually fostered the sounds at the University of Wyoming for electronic study, see if they were real. And they were, by the way. And it just, he said, stay with science. He had a master's degree in science. So, science that I knew of Newtonian physics, just did not answer the enigmas we were associated with up there. So we just kind of put those on the shelf and said, well, it's something we don't understand. So what? Well, so it's taken me all the way through 50 years now of researching what these things are. I've been pretty much around the world, and it's just been a phenomenal journey trying to figure this out, and nobody's figured it out yet, other than I think I may be closer than most, because it got me into the science that could be behind this. And because everybody first called me the woo-woo when I came out with this, he's in the woo, he's a paranormal investigator or something. Well, I didn't take offense to that, because it is what it is, and whatever. But I found that the science of quantum physics actually explains a lot that goes on in the woo. and it's a acknowledged science around the world. And so I started looking into that, and that really got me interested in the early 2000s. And I started looking into that, and that does it. We live in a third dimensional environment, and so it's taken me kind of a loop all the way from the camp all the way into what we're all about, how far back we really go, and what are we here for, and what are they here for, and all that. And it's got me into quantum science, and it answers the questions. Really, it does.
So do you think then, Ron, with the in-depth research that you've done, that eventually the science of what Bigfoot is, and like you said, and I do agree with you, you're probably closer than most, will be solved? It's just an exotic science that we haven't reached yet, or we have a point that we've not got to.
Yeah, it's we deal in classical science because it's in a third density environment, but there's more densities out there. There's more things going on that we don't see, feel, or touch, or isn't physical, and it's all there, and it's really interesting to study because you find that there's a lot of things around us now that we don't see. We only see within 430 and 770 terahertz. That's our light's frequency. Everything has a frequency. Everything is energy, frequency, and vibration. Energy vibrating at a frequency. We are at the most minute level energy. So Einstein said in early years, if you can find the matter of anything, if you can find the frequency of anything, you can change its matter. So you have to get in the right vibration. And then you got into Dr. Paul Dirac from 1933, who won the Nobel Prize for antimatter. And that was the direct exchange between matter and energy. So those things can interchange. You just have to find the frequency. No big deal, right? None of us are walking on water yet.
No, I'm not quite doing that.
No, I'm not. So anyway, you got that. And then it was established by CERN in 2012 that matter and energy are interchangeable. They actually, the Hadron Collider, they shot a particle off, and it manifests itself in energy. You can sense energy, but you can't see it. And that's where we're at with these people that say that's all will disappear. Somehow they can change their matter. They're not all the same, by the way. Let me get that down. But they can change their matter into energy, which we're all capable of doing if we can find the frequency. And
do you, obviously, I'm saying obviously as though I know and I don't, but do you think then that is the secret of their success, to remain so elusive? That because how many you know this as well as I do, that I've had reports where people have said they've watched this thing just go past a tree and it's not appeared at the other side of the tree. And it must be so hard for the I'll throw this into the UFO realm as well, and I'm not saying that they're connected to UFOs, but the nuts and bolts UFO men, the bipedal flesh and blood creature. It must be so hard for people to get their head around this other aspect that you're suggesting with the Bigfoot. Do you find yourself, without mentioning any names, because it's all good, in conflict with other researchers who firmly believe that this is some kind of hominid that we've not yet discovered?
Well, yes and no. I know these guys a lot. I've met them all, pretty much all of them, and they're trying, but they use their Newtonian physics head, the one we trained in the 5th grade, to believe that everything is out there. That's what you can see, feel, touch, and material, and physical, and measurable, and all that stuff. But quantum physics is not that way. So I don't find myself so much in conflict with them as I do to just try to explain to them that there's more out there that you don't see. And can they disappear? Are these laws true? Well, mathematically, they've been proven to exist. And yet it's hard to get your head around that because we're in this third density environment. And until we get out of that, and I use this as an example, but our brain is conditioned. Academia's brain is conditioned. Some academia just totally disagree. They got to be just flesh and blood. Well, nothing. It's just flesh and blood. Everything is energy. And if these things can manipulate that somehow, then that would explain a lot of what people are seeing. And native lore says they actually go into trees and energize in trees. Really? My last book, they need energy because they've been crossbred a lot with indigenous people over the eons of time. These things have been here a long time. And really, I think they were here before Homo sapiens. So it got me way back into ancient cuneiform text, which is the Anunnaki's message to the Sumerians, in Mesopotamia. And you read that, it's the oldest known written language known. And a lot of the scriptures from biblical texts, from Greek mythology and all that stuff comes from that written language. But it's all been diluted down and then created to create the narrative that the leader at the time wanted to have to his people. And it's all about control and power. And so anyway, if you get into that and really try to understand, and instead of just knocking it, saying, no, it can't be real, well, it is real.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just not real. It's just not real to our
It's not
senses.
real to us. But I'm Ron. I'm on the same page as you. I really am, and I'm not just agreeing with you. If anybody, our listeners will be familiar with the way I talk about things, and it's absolutely on the money. Do you think then, Ron, that these creatures are in every part of the world, most countries of the world, or do you think they're localized to certain?
Well, they seem to be, Paul. They seem to be all over. I mean, I've been in Nepal, I've been in Bolivia, I've been in Russia, I've been in Siberia, I've been these places researching this stuff, and really, they all got stories, and the stories are there. So, what are they seeing, and what are they talking about? Well, I think, like I said a few minutes ago, they've been probably diluted down from crossbreeding with indigenous people, which means 23 pairs of chromosomes, which means they have a human component, which, by the way, I think I've concluded in my last book that I published that they have to have a human component. Most all of them do. And that's because, at least the ones we dealt with up there, have a language. And that language is only supposed to be contributed to Homo sapiens, us. Yeah. And that's a cognizant speech, one that makes sense for everything communicates. There's no doubt about that. Dolphins communicate, whales communicate, spiders probably communicate. It's all through pheromones or infrasound or ultrasound or something like that. But we talk within a certain frequency. Everything's frequency. You got to get that out there. Keep that out there. And again, a lot of them have crossbred, so a lot of them appear to be different than others, and a lot of them have different attributes than others. Plus, I think we've been visited by aliens, and if you get into the cuneiform text, you realize the Anunnaki were the fallen ones, the bright ones from the stars who came down and started messing with the genome of our species and different species on this planet. And they're not the only ones. I mean, a lot of different, got to get in aliens where they're here. And they've been coming here a long, long time, and they've messed with this planet. They want this planet. This planet's a jewel of the solar system, We first, Al Berry, who went into camp to try to actually uncover a hoax, he thought, because he'd been told about this from Ivan Sanderson all the way into Peter Byrne, which let him out of his job in Northern California, come down and interview us. He was looking to see who could be pulling the leg because nothing like this ever happens before that they know of. And anyway, he fostered the studies at the University of Wyoming. He recorded them, found out too that he couldn't figure out how anybody could be hoaxing us when we're 8 miles in the wilderness and 8,400 feet in elevation. Nobody else around that he knows of, or any of us know about. And so he got Dr. Curlin, Professor Curlin, a sound engineer, to look at them. This man is really a high profile electrical engineer at the University of Wyoming. So he took the sounds unbiasedly to find out and tell Al if it was real or if they were manufactured anyway. And he said, no, these are not manufactured. There's no signs of that. They're not speeded up. They're not slowed down. There's no 60-cycle hum. There's no evidence at all that they were played backwards or anything like that. And that's what people were accusing us of, something like that. So he had that down, that they have not been manipulated in that fashion, in any fashion, really. So that was good. And he presented his findings to the academic in University of British Columbia in 1978, I think it was. Yeah. And anyway, they still didn't have enough. They still got to think in the parameters that they were trained in. It has to be an ape in the woods, like we were thinking. Well, that was a good report, and he wrote about that in Man Like Monsters on Trial. He shows a graph in there where the sound debits ran, and they were inside, outside, below, and above the average human range. And one of the little samples he took said it represented an animal over 8 foot tall. Well, that's pretty unique,
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you have Scott Nelson in 2008. You got a hold of him by accident. He's a cryptolinguist trained by the Navy as a cryptolinguists for the Navy to listen to sounds or codes or anything like that to see if it's a language. If so, is there any mockery in it or trickery or anything? He heard him back, so he came out and interviewed me and Alberry both to find the context. Actually, he could study him. He said he thought he heard language in that. Well, he went back and he came back with a statement later on, said, yes, they have a language, and that's unique. That's unique to humans.
Absolutely, yeah.
Found out later from Dr. Lieberman, Brown University, professor of cognitive research in great apes. And he said only humans have the vocal mechanism for language, which is the hyoid bone connected through the tongue nervous system into the brain, which lets me say what I'm seeing and talk to you like I'm talking now. So that pretty much says what we were dealing with has a human component, but they're not human.
I was just going to say, is that the reason you said earlier?
Yeah.
This has a human component. Yep, got it. Thank you.
That and then the DNA that has been done, which has been two different geneticists do that, say they come back with a mitochondrial that has human in it, and that's been thumbed down by regular academia because if it's got human in it, it can't be real. They say it's been contaminated or something. Well, that's their opinion, and that's why they foo-fooed all that information, is because it just doesn't fit in their paradigm. But academia has been trained, and I'm talking about Grover Krantz, University of Washington, and then another man, he's deceased now, but he said that he just couldn't believe that these things could talk, and he wouldn't even give me an audience to talk to him. And I lived in the same town he did up in Washington for a while and tried to get audience with him, and he said, no.
It's terrible. It's almost my mind's made up and I'm not changing.
Yeah, and he writes about that too. And it's just like, yeah, my mind's, that's not science. That's closed-mindedness.
Absolutely.
And you got a couple others. I don't want to mention any names, but it's they can't deal with it if it hasn't been established by the discipline that they've been trained in, which is, you know what? It's Newtonian physics. But science has got to be open-minded, and I relate it in my books as a parachute. If a parachute don't open, it's not much good. So you got your mind set like a parachute, and it's what's been conditioned on our head by everything right, wrong, whatever.
Yeah.
But I got a little deeper. The pineal gland. Way back in ancients, they talked about the
pineal gland,
pineapple-looking gland that's inside your head. It's the third eye, and that's the dodge you see in a lot of Indians. And it has to be, and it is connected to the heart. The heart has more energy than any part of your body, and it's got its own brain. And it's a gut feeling you get sometimes when you see a situation and your gut tells you a certain thing. Well, that has to be in coherence with the one that's been conditioned up here, because it's been conditioned in the third density. So once you can open that up and get the coherence going, that's what chakra is all about in ancient tech. Is that, and once you get all that balance, you'll be able to see with the third eye, which does not require light. It's got the attributes of an eye, but it doesn't have the actual eyeball that requires light like these two do.
Yeah.
So I encourage anybody to just start doing the research and look into that. I read a report here the other day, talked about the Sierra Sounds, and I don't know how old it was, but they talked about it, they just couldn't believe it. Well, they're not looking at the science that's been done and how things really work. And you find out how things really work, according to Dr. Christopher Breyer, West Texas A&M, is everything from the atom through the cosmos works on the laws of quantum physics. Well, but you don't see quantum physics, but it's out there.
Yeah.
And it's there, and it's been established as an actual science.
And without, obviously, you're not going to name names, and it might not have happened, but as I bet there have been men of science who've been on the same page as you, but just don't put their head above the parapet. And have you spoken to people who've said, Ron, you're really onto something here, but I can't go public with it because it's more than my job's worth?
Well, they're afraid I'll tell their name. But I know there's scientists that I know that want to believe in this, and they do believe in it because of the tracks and the dermal ridges in the tracks and how they can't be faked. Yet until they see a body or get something they can dissect and check out and do the DNA and do all that, they got to stay within the parameters, or they could lose tenure if they're not already tenured, and they can lose respect from their colleagues. They'll go downhill. They have to stay within the discipline that they've been trained in. And I understand them. They're good people. They just have to. That's what they spend a lot of money on. That's what they learned, and that's what they're going to do. And I don't think they'll get out of that until one of these things pops up in front of them and says, "Here's the way it is," and that's what they need.
Well, Ron, before you kind of take us with a little bit of detail to that night, in that's kind of life-changing night, really, 1971, when you recorded the sounds. Do you want to just walk us into it, and I'll bring Les on in 2 minutes?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. Yeah, the first sound I think we're going to play is well, they're kind of aggressive sounding sounds, but they're it's a male and a female. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a male and a female. And Alberry recorded those actually. It was so clear. We used those on the first CD that I produced, and he got a lot more. But it wasn't just 1 year. It went on year after year. That's what made it so incredible.
Was it a certain season, Ron? Then when you said went on year after year, was it?
It was more later in the season. You know, we go up there as soon as the snow would let us, because you couldn't get in until April, sometimes even May. You know, because of the snow load in the Sierras. And Alberry went in 72. We packed him in horses and mules, and I got him there, and he started recording the same things. And so he had his mic remoted above our little shelter, about 40 feet on a little sibling tree, and he recorded these sounds, and that's the ones that this is the one you're going to hear that Dr. Curlin, well, he listened to all of them, so unbiased.
So, there we go. Thank you.
So it sounded like mooey tail, gobble, gobble, gobble. Well, that is in the human average human range, and that's one I use in my presentation, showing how they are in that range also. But those other little marks are outside the human range and the average human range. So anyway, this was made in 1972, Alberry's recordings. And then 2 years later, I recorded these ones you're going to hear now, which is my interaction with them. It's
Thank
it's,
you.
it's just one of the first times they.
Right there, just see movement right through there.
Yeah, that was 1974. So this was 2 years later, same camp. Just two of us were in camp, me and my friend Bill McDowell. We'd packed supplies in. We were coming in just to bring some things, and we stayed there for a few days. But this happened before we got into the shelter, which is unusual. Normally, they wouldn't interact with us or do anything until we were inside the shelter, and that's what makes it so hard, because as soon as you jump out.
Why would that be, do you think, Ron? I know you can only speculate, but why no interaction until you're inside?
Well, they don't want to be seen, and they don't want to shine flashlights on them. And I say that because once you shine a flashlight out there, coming from, they're gone. And,
obviously, I will let you talk, but I just want to get this in because it'll leave my head.
Okay.
After you've described the sounds like you've just have done for us before Les played those, once we get them in context, you can clearly hear that there's some kind of disagreement and disapproval between. We know that we don't know the language, and then there's a conversation going off, and the photographs kind of fitting, because obviously that's not the exact location, I wouldn't think, but that's the kind of environment that these creatures have been recorded in, and there's nothing there. There's nothing at all, is that? It must have been a quite fearful thing to be listening to that, I would think.
Well, we had high-powered guns, so it gave us a little security. We thought, it's a hunting camp.
Yeah.
And Alberry, he had a 45 too, but he was very much trying to get some more evidence up there, and which that's fine. We were having kind of a good time with it. After a while, we realized they weren't going to eat us, and the argument they got going on, according to another linguist that listened to it, who's a court-certified linguist in California, multiple languages, speaks without accent and everything. perfect hearing. She said that she listened to these, and she said that there was a male and a female, and well, I got to tell you, the female won the argument. But we don't know if they were arguing over the food that we left out there for them, or if they're arguing over who's going to get the salt and pepper for us. You don't know. You just don't know what you're dealing with. We didn't know. And so that went on in 1972, that aggressive type.
And of course, what we consider an argument, do you think that might be just their vocalization?
Well, it was.
Yes. So not necessarily an argument. That's what I'm getting at. Do you think?
Well, you can use your judgment on that one. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine being there and hearing that. That must have been an incredible, I don't know, hairs on the back of everywhere standing up kind of moment.
Well, you don't know. I mean, you don't know, but you're stuck there. I mean, you can't just walk out and leave. You're kind of there. It's 8 miles trek through pretty imposing area. So you're there. And one of the guys who went back when the Johnson brothers first reported, he went back up with the others, and they started hearing these things again. He got so frightened, very religious, and he didn't know where to put that in his thinking. So he shot out the next morning. He didn't know what to do. He was just hammered with this fright, really.
Yeah.
Absolutely. He wouldn't go back. In fact, that's what got me involved. Was the wife said, "You got to go back and see if the guys are okay, because they didn't come out when they're supposed to." So he said, well, "I'll go back if Ron will go with me," because I was friends with him. So that's how I got involved in the camp. That was 1971, and they were okay. Obviously, they just spent another extra day. So anyway, Donald, to my knowledge, never. Well, he didn't. He never went back to spend the night, and he's passed away.
And after you'd heard them and knew the reality of what they were, because obviously I'm assuming that you'd hunted and spent time in those forests many years. Was nothing ever the same for you then, Ron? You couldn't look at it the same.
No, you can't. I mean, it gets on you, and you're looking behind the trees. You're looking everywhere you can when you're out in the woods, and it's just you don't know what to think. You still don't know what they are. You just know that they haven't hurt you yet. If they plan on hurting you, or eating you, or whatever, they would have done it already.
Yeah.
They're that big, they're that strong, they're that powerful. So you just kind of you feel a little better. In fact, Warren Johnson and I went out to the shelter one time when one of them was mouthing off right behind this big tree out there. And we thought, we'll run out there right quick and see him at bright moonlit night. So we jumped out of the shelter door right quick, which is the log between 2 big trees. That's the door.
Yeah.
And we started walking up towards this tree thinking we were going to see it run away. Well, it didn't run away. Nothing ran away. And but we kept walking closer and closer. First thing you know, about probably 15 feet away from that tree, we both got froze, and I related to like a force field. That's one of those strange things that went on up there. And you couldn't move forward, and he couldn't either. And we weren't talking to each other, but what he'd do with that, he said, "I can't go any further." I said, "I can't either." And he said, "Well, let's go back." And went back. As soon as we got back in, this thing started mouthing off again behind this tree. So we thought, well, he got us. And I brought that up to a scientist later on. He said, "Well, we're going to deal with your fears. Science don't deal with fears." I said, "We weren't afraid. We knew they weren't there to hurt us, or they could have already done it. They could tore through that shelter anytime they wanted to. I'm sure of it." But he said, "Well, it has to be pheromones or infrasound to affect you like that." And I said, "Well," at the time I thought, "Well, it's an animal out in the woods still, just some kind of great ape. So it has to be. It can't be pheromones because it only works within the same species. So it has to be infrasound." And I still stick with infrasound because that does affect people."
Sorry, Ron. I was just going to say, I'm asking you to describe the indescribable or undescribable, but because I was going to say this force field, this perception of not being able to move forward, it can't have been physical. Did you feel it internally? I'm trying to get my head around it, and not in a disbelieving way, but
I still can't get my head around it, Paul. I mean, I don't know, because it happened to me again out in the woods one day out there. I wasn't thinking about Bigfoot. I just walk along because we was on a hunting spree, a couple hundred yards apart, going through this area. And all of a sudden, I got stopped, and I couldn't move. I kept looking around a little bit, looking for what could be doing this, That's when the hair sends in the back of your neck, you don't know what's going on, but as soon as it came, as quickly as it came, it left
Yeah.
after a few seconds. And
Do you think that's something primal within Ron Morehead and other people who've experienced it, or do you think that's something that the creature is putting onto you?
yeah, it's frequency.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
that they tune in your frequency. They can mess with you, and they do mess with people. By the way, they're not supposed to interfere with us, but they were definitely interfering with us up there, and nothing's supposed to interfere with what we are and what we're supposed to be doing here on this planet. We're all here for experiences, and we're
yeah.
supposed to respond to those experiences with our own thinking, not with somebody else's influence. So anyway, I don't know what rules they were going by, but they were messing with us up there. And for a while, we thought we were there to study them, and then we realized they're probably looking at us more than we're looking at them. One night, we fixed some stew and made some Jello in the snow that was left over from spring, and we had a big serving spoon, and we left some out for them. And sure, soon as we went inside the shelter, they came in, and we started hearing them out there by the stove area. And went out the next morning. The stew was all gone. The big serving spoon that was in the stew was over in the Jello bowl, and the Jello was all gone. So what are they doing? They're using the spoon to eat. Come
Yeah,
on, they use a spoon to eat the stew and the Jello. Well, I wouldn't see them do that, but they something like that did it. I mean, that's where the noise was coming from. So I think
absolutely.
they're
I'm sorry.
messing with us. Well, no, go ahead.
I think I probably know what you're going to say again about the frequency, but what about the lower silence? I call this the lower silence, and what I find interesting, Ron, there's so many attributes to the Bigfoot phenomena, Sasquatch, that bleed through into all types of unexplained phenomena. So are they all using the same type of exotic science? And I don't mean that they're scientists. They're all using the same principles. Because you in a UFO event or alien abduction type event, people talk about everything just going silent. Not in every instance. The cryptid type phenomena, people will talk about being in the forest, the woodland, and suddenly everything descends into this lower silence.
Right. That's how
What
it
do
went
you?
with us up there.
Yeah,
That's a telltale sign when everything stops. And it's just like, okay, what's going to happen? Because everything stops and you don't hear anything except what they want you to hear. And we thought for a while maybe they're able to somehow influence our minds. So we was imagining a lot of this stuff, but they'd have to do that to all of us up there. And
yeah.
there was 5 of us left after Donald wouldn't go up there anymore. And so yeah, I think we are all given a lot of attributes. Our DNA has it. It's been chopped off, and our telomeres have been severed. We only live a certain length of time now. We only have certain frequencies we can easily get, and yet we have all those abilities in us. I think we have the ability to ascend into another mind thinking, and that's going to get us out of this third density. But while we're here for the experience and to learn and to grow. And by growing, I mean change our frequency to a higher level, so that when we do pass out of this body, which is going to pass away, our cognizance, our consciousness is going
The
to
essence of what
keep
we
going.
are.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
who we really are, because we're not someone walking around with a spirit. We're a spirit walking around with a body. This body is going to pass away like it always does, and yet the spirit goes on. According to science, it can't die. So what happens if you haven't learned everything in this lifetime? And when I say learn, we have to learn how to respond to things with love and compassion. If we don't learn how to do that, you're not going to ascend. You're going to stay in this density.
So where are you then on what reincarnation and things like that? Do you think that exists? Do you think that happens? Transmigration, do they call it?
Well, I wasn't raised that way for sure. I was raised religiously, and no, you're here one time and you better make the best of it. Well, I don't believe that way at all now. No, you got to finish your karma. You got to finish. That's why we're here, to finish and to make things better. And until we learn how to treat everything with love and compassion, don't be a victim, and just realize that you're here to learn from it. I tell my grandkids when they're playing football or something, I said, don't, well, we lost it. I said, no, you never lose. You either win or you learn something. Well, that's where we're at. We got to learn something, and then we'll win.
Absolutely. Do you think, Ron, that these creatures, well, it does some seem right appropriate calling them creatures, but these other intelligences, the Bigfoot, do you think that they're interested in certain individuals? Meaning, I'm sorry for cutting through your words again. Meaning, when you've taken a group of people out there, or certain, you kind of know that you're going to get some interaction, and other people, it's just going to be flat. Nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, I think it's about frequency again. I'll get back into that because your
Please do.
energy. Yeah. So if you're out there with a gun trying to get the money shots, you're probably never going to see one unless it's an accident. It's like, was it? I lost his name right now, but he shot one in 1924 in Mount St. Helens. Yeah, and claimed he shot it, went off the cliff, and they never could find the body. Well, they were miners, and they were all being harassed by Fred Beck. That's his name.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, he wrote a story about that because they went out there with the sheriff's posse. They looked what was going on but prior to that, he had found some tracks, him and the other guy, the other miners, that just stopped in the snow, and they never could figure that one out. Well, we had that happen to us up there. We had a little 9-inch track, an 18-inch track. We had the snow, and all of a sudden they stopped. Well, okay, it jumped somewhere. Something happened. You just sort of put that on the shelf because you can't figure it out,
Yeah.
Well, in 2012, when Scott Nelson and I were trying to get back up there, he's a cryptolinguist who studied them also, and couldn't get into camp. It just, one thing after another was happening, and I cracked a rib on the fall I had off the cliff and sprung my wrists, and things were happening. Anyway, I went back and set up a tent down where my daughter was sitting about 8 miles away. And, well, make a long story short, she had a sighting that morning from the tent her and my granddaughter was in, and we found the trackway later. I got a picture of this in my book, and the trackway just stopped. Well, I've explained earlier how that happens, and that's the direct exchange between matter and energy. Because once you change your matter into energy, you won't have any more density, so your trackways are going to stop. I've had reports of that a lot over the years. Not a lot, but a few times. And that to a lot of researchers just say, well, it's a helicopter picked up, it's phony, nothing. Well, they're not thinking outside the box. They got to get outside the box. Got to get outside this parameters that you've set for you.
Sometimes the explanations cooked up by science and academia are more ridiculous than thinking outside the box. Do you know what I mean? An helicopter's picked it up. But sorry, Ron, to stop you mid-flow. Yeah. What about the lights that people see in conjunction with sightings of these beasts, these creatures?
We had lights up there, and orbs, things like that. In fact, in 2016, I was up there with another person, and this bolt of light. I say bolt, it sounds like something fast, but it wasn't moving fast. It was probably 3, maybe 4 foot long, glowing, just floating through the trees. And I mean, we're outside in a tent that time because 2015, the camp had been tore apart. I mean, we had to take everything out. The Johnson brothers have been hauling stuff in there since the 50s. They was ready for Armageddon. And anyway, the Forestry Service said, we know that stuff's up there. You got to get it out or we're going to fine you for it. So anyway, it got out. The camp is still there, but the shelter's not there. And the supplies aren't there anymore. The barrels aren't there anymore. Nothing. But this light comes floating by us. We was in the tent looking out through the skylight there and seeing this light. I kind of look at this, and he rose up and looked, and it just watched it for several seconds while it just went down the ridge. And you don't know what that's about, dude. But it's
white light. What it white or amber?
Yeah, white.
White.
Anyway, it was just really concerning because you don't know what you got there. You don't know what it's going to do. You don't know what it's all about. But nothing up there surprises me. It just things happen, and it's just one of those places that things happen. And actually, in 2018, when I took David Pilates and his filmer up there, they wanted to interview me around the shelter and around the camp, not the shelter stuff. Anyway, they reproduced that light going across through the forest. Did a real good job. It looked just like what they reproduced.
What you saw.
That's in Missing 411, The Hunted.
Yeah.
And that was I got about 15 minutes in that CD that people could see, DVD.
And I don't just mean we've got to dwell on the Sierra sounds as such. I'm talking about the sounds, the mimicking sounds, and other things that people hear, not just where you are, but all over the world. Where primarily where I spend a lot of time, there's an area of woodland called Danes Dyke. It's got cryptid reports in it. You wouldn't think it were big enough to even support something so big, but people also report on when they've done some wild camping in there, and this is recent as last year, we got a report of a guy who'd been in there alone during the night. Actually bumped into him at about 5 a.m, 4:30, 5 a.m in the morning, because I go at ridiculous times myself. Me and my brave little dog. If you saw my little dog, it's about as big as a rabbit. But anyway, I bumped into this guy, and we got talking, and he told me that during the night he'd heard a sound, bearing in mind there's no machinery in there, and it sounded like, imagine the bucket of a 360 or a digger dragging along concrete, steel dragging. And I said, where did you hear it? He says, around me. He said, and sounds that just shouldn't be. And you get reports of strange sounds like that then, Ron?
Yeah, I think this. Yeah, you'll hear. I've heard reports of people hearing their dog's name being called when their dog's not with them, when their name's being called, or something. They hear. Or a lot of people say they hear the chatter that we've recorded, that they've heard on extra CDs, and so a lot of reports like that. But not a lot of people are walking around with tape recorders.
No,
so they don't record it.
Do you think a person's reaction to what they are hearing, because we know that you've just said it's all about intent, and if you went in there with a gun, you're probably not going to see one of these things, or if you are, it's not going to end well. I would. Well, you know what we're as human beings. You react and adapt to what you're faced with, don't you? So if they were faced with a gun, surely they're going to retaliate. But do you think a person's reaction, say, to the sounds or the way they're feeling, do you think what am I saying? Do you think these things can sense our moods?
Well, if they don't sense them, yeah, I think they kind of know. But I think they read your aura, their energy, and
yeah.
But they're not all the same.
No,
these things, and they don't all have the same attributes. I don't know that they can all talk like the ones we dealt with talk, and I mean talk cognitively like we're talking now. But the biggest thing I could tell people is fear. If you have fear, anything will play off your fear, because we're creating a lot of stuff.
The energy. Yeah.
We create that in our heads a lot of times, because fear is just the absence of the knowing. And once you know, and at least feel better, you don't have the fear of it. And we got where we didn't fear these things up there. And so it's just a matter of trying to train yourself to not be afraid. I've been up there by myself, and basically to face that, make sure I was going to be okay.
You kind of jumped my question, actually, because I was going to say, have you ever felt fearful, or did you in the early stages feel fearful?
Not so much, because I knew these things had not eaten these guys before when they first was up there, when I wasn't. And I knew that they hadn't been attacked yet, and they hadn't shot at them. So there's no reason to have the fear that they had. You can't help but get concerned, but I've been a Christian person, a person who believes the hereafter is something. So I have a feeling about myself that it can't be hurt no matter what. My body can go, but my essence is going to be okay.
How do you attribute then the incredible bursts of speed, Ron? I'm meaning because primarily when you look at the descriptions or look at the drawings that people have done of these things, they almost look endomorphic. You've got the mesomorph, the ectomorph, and these things look lethargic. And obviously they're not, because there's these reports of the incredible speed.
Very fast. The one I saw in 1974 when I was interacting with him, he's the one that made the samurai cry behind me, and there was, we think, a male and an adolescent down below by the creek. That's the ones Bill saw. And then when this thing went by, I saw it, and it just like it was floating, but it was going so fast down this ridge to where the other ones were, towards the creek. Inhuman-like. I mean, nobody could run through the woods like that.
No.
And, at least nobody that I know of. So it's like they're floating. I've heard that report quite a bit over the years, that they look like they were floating. But I don't know how they do that.
No,
but I just know that happens. I mean, I know it happened when I was watching.
When me and Les made the documentary Wolflands, I spoke to lots of witnesses, and one that didn't we didn't get to Wolflands, didn't get to the documentary, because we call it Wolflands primarily because there's a lot of dogman stroke werewolf type reports in it, but we did get reports that things that unmistakably could have been nothing more else but the Bigfoot, the Sasquatch. And I one that didn't make it to the documentary, but it was equally as important or interesting, is 3 guys who were mountain biking in a place called Dalby Forest in North Yorkshire. The North Yorkshire Moors National Park is quite big, nothing like the expanses of land you guys have got, but it's 525 miles of woodland and forest and farmland. And they reported going down a logging road on their bikes, and this thing is in the bracken about 30 to 40 foot away from them. And they said that we know there's all the divots and there's all the rocks and fallen trees, and it's just, he said it looked like an upright gorilla, and there was no motion, it was just paralleling them and looking at them, and they could never understand it. Or I only spoke to one of the witnesses, says I could never understand it. He says, we're going like hell for leather on this road, trying to get away from this thing, and it's just paralleling us as we're going down the road, but there's no movement. It's incredible. I'm so fascinated by these reports, and as you know, Ron, nobody's really got a lot to gain. I suppose in the early days, even less to gain, for the fear of ridicule and the just flat blank, I don't believe you. I think now people are a little bit more open to it. Certainly when it comes to UFOs and things, people are realizing that the reality of these things. But your particular subject, the subject I'm immersed in as well, which is your subject, I think that people are becoming more accepting of it. But how do you equate this movement, this like, what do you call it? Say like an elevator moving like.
I don't know. I do believe there are other elements besides Bigfoot out there that have been messed around with the genome, like the dogman.
Yeah.
There are a lot of reports of dogman back east here. I've been down in Land Between the Lakes, down in the Kentucky area. Huge park. And there's been some deaths reported down there. And actually, I was taken there by a retired deputy sheriff.
Martin Groves.
Yeah, Martin Groves.
Yeah, speak to Martin. Interesting guy.
He is very interesting. Nice person. And also Daryl Denton.
Daryl Denton, yeah, I've spoke to Daryl many times. A lovely fella. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, he and I are starting a podcast, by the way, here in a few weeks.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, count me in.
Well, it's going to be called Two Real, the CWO Real Cryptid Legends.
Absolutely. Oh, brilliant.
Well, that's going to be the.
I look forward to listening to that, because there's such an appetite. They're not stories. They're beyond stories. The people's experiences.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what can trouble me a little bit is the scientists who are chiming in on this thing and saying this, that, and the other don't have any experience. Well, I've had the experience. I've got the background, the knowledge of what I think puts it together for a lot of people, and they don't even want to interview me or talk to me, because it's outside their parameters of what they're going to accept.
and do you find that? Well, obviously, you find it probably annoying and frustrating, really, because
it was, but I don't care anymore. I don't, whatever they think is what they want to think, and that's what they'll go with, and that's okay. Everybody has a choice. Everybody has a choice whether they believe me or not. But I am what I am. I'm in my 80s now, and I just I don't care. I just want to say what I think I know and what I do know and what has happened and where it's taken me, because it took me from the Bigfoot realm into what I'm talking about today with you. I think that's very important that people realize who they are as human beings and who what's all about. But a lot of things you find in Genesis of our Bible, first few chapters, is parallel with the Anunnaki story of fallen angels and alien intervention and all that stuff.
What do you think then, Ron, to the potential that there's a Bigfoot stroke alien connection? And I do have a story that can touch on this, but what's your views? Do you think that there is a connection with the alien scenario and the Bigfoot? Do you think Bigfoot's an alien?
Well, they used to be. I think we all are. Something made us all. And yes, I do believe in UFOs and aliens. They connect. That was first presented actually in a newspaper in 1888. Huffington Post posted in 2012 where a rancher and some Native Americans saw this big moon coming down, and 3 crazy bears jumped out of it.
Yeah.
No, and I saw a UFO up there one time, which
Oh.
was happening during this Bigfoot stuff. A big blue ball come down and slowly, and we lost it behind the trees. And I say big, it wasn't like this big. It was huge. It was huge.
It's incredible. Well, if I can just break in for 2 or 3 minutes here, because I really appreciate you giving us this time. I'll just briefly tell you this story from a place called Pinchenthorpe Forest.
Okay.
Pinchenthorpe Forest way up in North Yorkshire, and there's a guy took 2 of his children wild camping. Spoke to the man many times over probably 10 years now, and they parked at the back of a dry stone wall where there were sheep in a field. He says it was a sludgy day. This is I want to just touch on the UFO connection, because I believe this guy's on the level and telling me the truth. He said we had a little wander into the forest, but then we got to the tent. We took our shoes off before we went in because they were sludgy with leaves on them and things like that. Got in the tent. He says during the night, he said, my 2 children are laid there and I'm laid at the side of them. He says, and I woke up, and you'll know this feeling, Ron, and I think a lot of listeners will as well. You got that feeling there's something not right. There's the hairs on the back of my head, neck. There's something not right. He said, no. He said, and then I watched, and the zip slowly came down the tent. He says, and I reached for a knife. He said, and a hand came in, a thin, fur-covered, he didn't say huge muscular arm, fur-covered hand, and it reached over towards my children, but then the head came in, and it looked at me, and it could see I was awake. He says, and it touched me on the forehead, and I went out. I'd gone completely out. He said, the next thing I know, I'm sort of in the tent. It's morning. There's sludge all over the tent, and footprints, like as though we'd been outside. And the children went, Dad, last night this happened. And he said, what happened? He said, we were carried across some fields to a spaceship by hairy Chewbaccas. That's the children's terminology for this. And he's stuck to the story. I mean, you probably run this story for 20 minutes. There's a lot more to it. But he's stuck to this story, and it's fascinating. And I'm thinking, is there an alien stroke UFO element to this? Or has this man had some kind of wild and crazy episode? I don't think he has. I think he's telling the truth. His children kind of verified it. He says the inside of the tent sort of depicted that we'd been out almost barefoot in the sludge, and the children had got these memories of being carried across a field by hairy Chewbaccas. Now, I don't know what that tells us, Ron. It could be one you've not heard before, but I bet you get to hear lots of weird and wonderful stories.
I do, and I appreciate them, because they're all kind of, when you're collecting this information over 50 some odd years like I have, you kind of start putting the dots together. What's coming out of this picture, and you get a picture, and that's what we like to talk about, is what we think is right and truth, and what people need to hear. And I appreciate that story. That's a good one, because aliens are definitely coming here. They've been coming here for eons, and I think there's a lot of hybridization going on. We're part of that, actually, from a long time ago. And so is Bigfoot, because they have a human component. At least I think they were created before Homo sapiens, but whatever.
Should we be just like certain humans? Bad moods, good moods, bad people, good people. Should we be fearful of some elements of the Bigfoot in certain locations? Have you heard that they're hostile and probably responsible for people going missing, do you think?
Well, I wouldn't say fearful, but I would say keep your flag up.
Yeah.
Be responsible and understand more, because the more you understand, the less fearful you'll be. And like the dog man down in the land between the lakes, they're responsible supposedly for killing people. You got the one up in Portlock, Alaska, where I went to a couple of years ago with the filming crew, and they were responsible for close to 3 dozen deaths up there, and people being mangled in this village in the late 40s. That was in the newspaper, and it's just I'm not sure what causes some of them to turn on you, or if they probably got shot at, or are they just bad? They are, some of them are made with different agendas.
What about the indigenous tribes and the people who are sort of living closer to the land? Have you spoke to? I'm assuming you have many of those type of people. And what do they? What's their view on the Bigfoot?
Oh, they claim they are live in two worlds. That's what I claim too. They can be in our three-dimensional environment, our three densities, or they can be out of it. And I think they do that through their frequency. They can change their matter into energy. And anyway, indigenous people don't have I mean, I haven't talked to any of them that have doubts about this. They think they're just something out there in the woods you want to let them alone. And so, yeah, they do. They believe it.
Well, Ron, you've given us an hour of your time, and I've really enjoyed speaking to you. And I want to just prompt you again when you bring the podcast. Don't forget me, because I'd love to share some accounts with you and Daryl Denton.
Oh, great. Yeah.
All I can say from myself and Les is thank you very much for sharing some time with us. And I'm really looking forward to the reaction that our listeners get from this, because you truly are, and I'm not just blowing smoke up anywhere, you truly are a legend within the subject.
Oh, well, that's nice of you to say. Thank you.
I've been thrilled to
my website, if anybody wants to order anything from my books or anything, is ronmorehead.com, and it's spelled 1 O, and it's just they can order them, and they're either downloadable or you get the paperback from the books through.
Well, what we will do, and I'm speaking for Les, but I know he'll do it, because we'll put some links up to the website, links up to the books within this interview, so that people can find Ron Morehead and the new podcast that you're going to be doing with Daryl Denton. When do you think that's going to be launched?
We're hoping to do a practice tomorrow, actually.
Oh, fabulous! Is it going to be live?
Well, we plan on some of it being live for sure. Yeah, because I'm going to be in the field. I'm going to West Coast here in June, and I got a event in Kentucky I'm speaking at here next week. And when I get back, I'm going to head out west, and I got a couple of conventions out there. So I got things going on this summer. I'm going to go to Philadelphia and then into Louisiana, and just much live. We're probably going to do some live stuff out in the woods, because Daryl still jumps around out in the woods. I don't do that so much anymore.
Well, there's been a few times during this interview when you actually jumped to the question I was going to ask, because you're there, you put the idea in my head, but you are already there doing it. So what does the future hold for Ron Morehead? We know we've got the podcast. I say things like, and I'm doing it, I'm not letting you start what I've asked you, but I say, because I'm all over the place in woodlands, forests, on cliff tops. I'm 62, and I'm thinking there'll be a time to sit down and sort of write more books and do more of that. Do you still see yourself getting out there and doing these nighttime visuals and wild camps?
I would like to, but again, I'm in my 80s, and I had a tumor removed off my brain 8 years ago, which caused me a little bit of balance issues and different things. So I'm kind of careful now, because I've had a few falls. I don't really jump around the creeks anymore. I don't walk across the logs or anything like that like I used to.
Not as wise, no.
But I love to do these podcasts like this, and I love to be at the conventions and do those things. So that's probably what I'm for, is that, because I should have been not here many times, as I've lived on the edge a lot. But that world turned around for me 8 years ago, and I still enjoy life, though, and enjoy that it's been good to me.
Well, Ron, all I can say is thank you. Thank you for sharing your views and absolutely great knowledge on the subject of Sasquatch. And I hope we can speak again. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. You have a good day.